According to a Sallie Mae survey, 84% of college undergrads had at least one credit card, and 50% have four or more. The average graduating senior owed $4,100. Can students really manage their credit card usage, or should they just say no to plastic money? To help us answer that question and more, we've asked Curtis Arnold of BestPrepaidDebitCards.com to join us on the Dollar Stretcher interview. Hi, I'm Gary Foreman, editor of TheDollarStretcher.com. Curtis Arnold is founder of CardRatings.com and BestPrepaidDebitCards.com. He's also the author of How You Can Profit from Credit Cards. With nearly 20 years in the field, he's been recognized as an expert by the Wall Street Journal, CNN Money, New York Times, and many others. And he's somebody that I respect in the industry. Curtis, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, Gary, for letting me on here, and it's great to be back.
Now, the same survey had 60% of the students saying that they were surprised at how much they owed. How big a problem are student credit cards?
Yeah, you know, student credit cards have been for years a big issue, and you know, it's not like students don't have enough financial challenges as it is by getting their scholarships and just paying tuition, and then you throw student loans, which is becoming a huge problem, as I'm sure you know. And then you couple that with high interest credit card debt. It's really a recipe for disaster. The good news is that there were some laws passed a few years back as part of the Card Act that limited marketing of student cards on campuses. So there's been some growth there and progress. And then also just how you would, as a student, could qualify for a student card. The new law that came out a few years ago said that you either have to have a cosigner that's an adult, or you have to be over 21 to apply for a student card. I think it is in your own name. So I think those laws had good intentions, and I think they have definitely curtailed some of the worst practices. Unfortunately, student debt, card debt, remains to be a big issue. And I haven't read any recent stats on student debt to see if there was any correlation between the law and the debt loads. And I think no doubt it's helped, but I don't think it's gone away by any stretch.
Yeah, besides what the law changes did for students, are there things that students can do themselves that'll keep them from having troubles?
You know, that's the whole point, and that's, Gary, you're hitting at what I'm really passionate about. As a consumer advocate, I have for many years student credit issues, student debt issues. It's been something I've been very passionate about. One of the reasons is because I have kids in college. I've got one in graduate school. We went through this process, and then I've got one that's going to be a sophomore, and then I've got a senior in high school. That'll be heading off to college soon. Crazy thought. But so anyway, this is a very personal issue to me, and I do think that we need to be proactive as parents, and then as students, our students need to be proactive. We can't rely on the government to protect us from every woe under the sun. And that's one reason I'm a big proponent of financial education. I require our kids and our family to take a personal finance class in college. They're not happy about it, but I can tell you this, my son that took one a few years ago has thanked me several times since then. And so taking the initiative to learn about student credit, student cards, these kind of issues, and just personal finance in general will pay, no pun intended, Gary, huge dividends in the long run.
Now I know you've been involved with both credit cards and the debit and prepaid debit cards. Do you think one has an advantage over the other for students?
Well, that's a great question, and there is some confusion about a lot of folks don't understand the differences, and there are some fundamental differences. I personally believe, and this is just personal opinion, that a college freshman, generally speaking, 9 times out of 10, of course it depends on the person, but should not have to handle or be put in a position to handle an unsecured credit card. I think there's enough transition and challenges as a freshman that all freshmen undergo as we're getting ready to go back to college campuses here in the next few weeks. And I just think throwing a unsecured line of credit into the mix for 9 times out of 10 is not a good idea. So that's why I think using a debit card or a prepaid card like we have on bestprepaiddebitcards.com is a great option, particularly for your first year or two. Now the downside, or one of the main downsides, is it does not help you build credit, but I would rather hold off a little bit on building credit a year or two, make sure you've made that transition to college well, and that you've proven to yourself that you can handle banking, just fundamental banking, that you can handle a checking account and balance your checkbook and everything before I give you an unsecured, $500 credit card and tell you to go out and spend. So I just think that's prudent and wise, and I think you can always, there's other ways to build credit as well, and that's important to do while you're in school. I think it's more important to stay out of debt.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you. It's a little bit like a learner's permit for the student.
Yeah.
And I agree with you too. I think the concern with how quickly you can build credit, well, you don't need to necessarily the week after you graduate go out and spend $200,000 on a house and a mortgage.
Yeah.
You don't need a ton of credit right out of school. There's a little time to still build it. Now, is there much difference between the various different debit cards that students might take a look at?
Yeah, I recommend to our, like we've got a senior in high school, we will give him a debit card this year. Debit cards in and of themselves have their own issues and challenges, and not the least of which is fraud concerns. But having that, at least you don't have the downside of an unsecured card and paying interest. Although, as you know, you can pay a lot in debit card overdraft fees. But we'll give our, kind of like a credit card training wheels, we'll give our senior, and we've done this every year, a debit card and see how he does. And as parents, you need to be actively involved in your son or daughter's financial life at that stage in the game. And so we will monitor that, and we will have ongoing discussions. It's a great opportunity to teach. And as a parent, and we're kind of getting off course here, but as a parent, you need to share your mistakes and be open and be very candid. And I think that resonates with your teenager. But anyway, once they kind of get that debit card, or if you're not comfortable getting a debit card, a prepaid card is an even safer way in a lot of ways to go, because it's not tied to an individual checking account directly. It is a bit nerve-wracking, even as an adult, for me to go out and use a debit card, because I know that it's directly tied into my checking account, and if there's issues, if I forget to record a debit card transaction and overdraft my account, then I'm going to be hit with fees, and a whole slew of things can happen. So a prepaid card is even a safer option, in my opinion, in a lot of ways, because it's a separate account, and as a parent, you could load your, every month your allowance onto that card for your son or daughter, and then that card is a standalone, and you as a parent can go online and monitor spending just like you could with a debit card in an online account without a lot of the downside. And you can only spend, generally speaking, what's on that card, and you're less likely to have the overdraft fees as well. There are some prepaid cards that do have overdraft fees, but as best I understand, that's an exception to the rule. So I like prepaid cards. Our son just got back from a senior trip to Washington, D.C. He had a great time. We weren't comfortable giving him, $400 or $500 in cash, but we weren't comfortable giving him our credit card. But we did give him a prepaid card and loaded some money on it, and it worked out great. And so that's a great option to consider.
Now, are there certain features or fees that students and parents should look at that are specifically good or bad for student cards?
Yeah, with a debit card, the advantage is generally, other than those overdraft fees, you're not going to have to worry about as many other fees. But now with a prepaid card, bestprepaiddebitcards.com, we try to rate these, but you will be hit often with some fees. Now the fees have come down, is the good news, and there are several of the newer prepaid cards by the larger card issuers. I'm thinking of American Express. They've got a relatively new card called Bluebird. They've got another great card called Serve, and I think on Serve it's only $1 a month. And then with Bluebird, if you use that card wisely, you can actually avoid fees pretty much altogether, depending on how you load money onto the card. But you want to look at those fees and figure out how you're going to use that card, how often you're going to use it. Are you going to go to the ATM to get cash out? How are you going to load money as a parent? Or if your teenager's got a job, great, have them load their own money on the card. But sometimes there are fees involved in that. But a lot of the newer cards, the fees are minimal. And so, but with credit cards, which we'll talk more about in a minute, typically on a student card there are no annual fees, which is a great thing. And some of the cards, like the Discover It card, has the first time you get a late fee, they waive that fee as a student. So specifically, it's marketed as a student card. No overdraft fees, no foreign transaction fees if you were to take a trip abroad. So some of these student cards, Capital One's another one with no foreign transaction fees, are pretty low fee cards options for you.
Now, are there any cards out there that you really feel should be avoided by students?
Yeah, there is, and I don't mind naming names on cardratings.com.
We were hoping you would.
Well, I was hoping you wouldn't be offended by that, or take offense to that, rather. But anyway, on cardratings.com, we list these student credit cards and rate them. And a card that bothers me, for example, is, and again, not just to pick on one particular card, but just an example, the Citibank Thank You Preferred card for students. Now, this is a reward card, Gary, and I generally am recommending reward cards for students because it's a proven thing that reward cards cause all of us, including adults, to spend more. And as a student, that's, again, a big red flag. So maybe as a senior, if you've proven yourself with the plain Jane non-reward card for a year or two, then you could kind of, quote-unquote, pardon the pun, graduate onto a reward card. But I think out of the gate, using a reward card is a bad thing. And with this card in particular, what bothers me is that they give you 2,500 bonus points out of the gate when you get the card. That's good. It's not negative. But the caveat to getting those points is that within the first 3 months of membership, you have to spend $500. And I think as a student, enticing them, using rewards to get them to spend more, I just, as a consumer advocate, have issues with that. Now, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense because, I mean, basically what you're saying is that you have somebody who's maybe untrained in using credit or debit cards to begin with, and you're just accelerating the process. I mean, it's like if you were your first driver's training, you wouldn't be on the interstate highway. Yeah,
and and again, as a student, because of the problems of student credit card debt, student loan debt, encouraging that student or enticing them to spend by dangling a pretty big carrot, 2,500 bonus points, may not sound like a lot to you and I, Gary, but as a college student, I don't know about you, but when I was in college, just to get a free T-shirt was a big thing to me. But, not to mention 2,500 bonus points.
Exactly.
But now, on the flip side, you can use rewards as a positive thing and in a way to encourage students to demonstrate positive card member behavior. And what do I mean by that? Take, for example, the Journey Student Reward Card from Capital One. This card gives you 1% cash back, so it is a reward card, but it also will give you, to entice you to use that card responsibly, an additional 25 cashback bonus every month, which effectively is 1.25% cash back if you pay your bill on time. So they're using rewards in a positive light to encourage that student to use their card and develop their credit in a responsible manner. And I think kudos to Capital One. I think using rewards for that purpose is a very cool thing. Citibank had a card called Forward that was a similar card, and again, as a student card, it gave you extra bonus points every time you paid your bill on time, you stayed within your credit line. That card, unfortunately, has gone away, and I don't know what happened to it. But this Capital One card, Journey, is a good option as well.
Yeah, no, that does sound good. Now, unfortunately, all of our viewers probably aren't that familiar with the bestprepaiddebitcards.com. Can you tell them a little bit about it, and also spend a little time maybe on your new book?
Yeah, by all means, thank you. Bestprepaiddebitcards.com is a relatively new site, so you probably haven't heard of it, but we're about 18 months old, and we rate, and another option for students I haven't mentioned, if you don't want to go the full credit card unsecured route, a great option is a secured credit card, where you actually have to load, basically up front when you apply for the card, if you want a $500 credit line, you deposit $500 with that card issuer into a savings type account, and that becomes a safety net or collateral, and your credit line is usually matched dollar for dollar, becomes $500. So that's a great safety net, a secured card. It does help you build credit, unlike a prepaid or debit card. But we have secured cards on bestprepaiddebitcards.com. We have the prepaid cards, of course, and a few other options that our students can consider, such as a gas card. We're getting into that, and we're looking at department store type cards, which generally, if your credit is marginal, you can qualify for a traditional gas card that you can only use at a particular gas station or department store card. Historically, they're known for people with marginal credit. And some students have good credit, so I don't mean to make blanket statements, but most are starting out, and so their credit is they're trying to establish credit. So that's what you'll find on bestprepaiddebitcards.com, just an awesome site. And then on cardratings.com, we focus more on credit cards, so you'll find the unsecured cards we talked about, reward cards. So depending on what you're looking at, I mean, there's no answer, no one size fits all, but I do encourage you to take your time, to start slowly, and focus on educating yourself as a student, and having, as your parent, being very involved in this process and using it as a teaching opportunity. Now, one other thing I'll mention real quick, Gary, the Discover It, and we're seeing more of these cards. Capital One made an announcement, I think, a few months back, where they will actually give you your free FICO score. And Discover It student card does this, I know, but they're not the only ones. But giving you your free credit score every month is a great tool that you as a student can learn about what a credit score is. That's what's so important, is that you build your credit score, and then how do you get a good credit score? Where do you stand this month compared to, you can track it every month. And that's a free feature some of the card issuers are offering. But anyway, and I'll get to the book. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Now, tell us a little bit about how you can profit from credit cards.
You bet. And hey, this book I wrote several years ago, but it's got a funny title, How You Can Profit from Credit Cards. It sounds gimmicky, and it's not. There is a section on student credit. So, but certainly as a student, again, using rewards and some different techniques I talk about in the book. I don't generally recommend, particularly for freshmen, sophomores. But if you're an upperclassman and you've proven to yourself and your parents you can manage your credit responsibly, then there's a lot of tricks I talk about in there. Ways to save money, ways to kind of quote unquote game the system, to make basically as you become more educated as a student, you can learn to make credit work for you. And learning about, and basically putting you in the driver's seat, learning different tips and techniques, you can, rather than credit costing you thousands of dollars in interest and really being a slave to a credit card or a slave to debt, it can actually empower you, believe it or not. And I'm living proof, because as a student, I had, when I graduated graduate school, I had about $45,000 in credit card debt. So I've been on both sides of the fence, Gary, and I try to practice what I preach these days. I don't carry any debt, and I preach to students, hey, if you learn how to use credit responsibly, instead of being a slave to credit and debt like I was, It caused me incredible anxiety. It can be very liberating, and you can actually use credit to your financial advantage and actually financially benefit from plastic. And there's several things I get into the book, examples. But one simple one would be carrying a credit card is a safer way than carrying cash. And so, but there's many examples of how using credit responsibly, and as you get out of college and you get that first mortgage we talked about earlier, you've already got a good credit score established, and that alone can save you, thousands and thousands of dollars in interest on your mortgage. And so the things you do as a student can have a ripple effect throughout your entire adult life. It's either going to have two effects. It's either going to have a positive effect, Gary, or a negative. And I hope it's going to have a positive effect for your listeners out there.
Well, it's like any other sharp tool. You can learn to use it well, and that takes learning, or you can end up cutting yourself. And sometimes you have to cut yourself to learn a little bit too. And well, Curtis, we thank you for your time and your wisdom and sharing it with our viewers. We're going to provide links to your sites and where they can buy the book for those that are ready for a graduate course in credit cards. And we want to invite viewers to subscribe to the Dollar Stretcher YouTube channel, follow us on the various social media, and visit our website, thedollarstretcher.com. We'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.